1, 1, 1. Oh, much better. That will save my throat. Anyway, so here's just a bit about the RavenDB history. We started it out in 2008. It was called at the time RavenDB. Now try to say RavenDB several times fast, and now you get why it's called RavenDB. By the way, why DivanDB? Anyone knows? Couch. Yeah. Basically, in 2008, I did the code review of Couch. I was very impressed, and I was very, I thought, you know what? I like this thing. It's really nice, but I don't agree with this and this and that. And it bugged me. So eventually, that became RavenDB. And in 2009, it became the RavenDB project. In 2010, we launched, and several months after, we had the first production deployment. Now we have hundreds of production deployments. Probably the part that you're most interested with is the estimated launch date for RavenDB 3.0, which is going to be around July. Just so you know, 3.0 has been around, whoa, okay. So some stats about RavenDB. I don't know if I believe those numbers, specifically this one. Because apparently I've been working on RavenDB since the 12th century. I'm looking young for my age. Anyway, so it's really impressive. It's really impressive because we have tremendous number of people who contributed and helped. And it's really funny to see the changes. In the mailing list, there is Chris that likes to say, oh, I'm still running on build 173. Build 173 was 4 or 5 years ago, and it couldn't do anything compared to what we have now. And oh, this is the next part of the schedule. And okay, took you long enough. Anyway, let's talk about RavenDB 3.0, and that's the actual reason why we are here. So we actually grew the team size tremendously. We currently have about 15 people who work full-time on RavenDB. And we have been doing that for the past year or so. Interestingly enough, not a lot of that is visible externally. Some of the things that went into RavenDB 3.0 actually was written for the first time in 2011. They have been in production at several customer sites, but we never actually got them to the state where we're happy to have them generally available. So I did some stats preparing to this conference, and apparently we have been doing that for 18 months, and we have at least 2 more. And you know, the change list is just enormous. And of course, the most important feature, it's really, really awesome. Okay, so this is the very, very high-level list of what we did. Voron, which is the new storage engine. This is the low-level, how we put things to the disk. We have the Oren and the web API change, in which we took our entire web stack and modernized that. You know what, let me just focus on this thing, because that was a very big change. And it's probably not something that you would feel. At least, I hope you won't feel that. But Voron as well, you shouldn't be feeling that you're using Voron. Maybe hopefully you will have it faster, but that's about it. The major reason that we did the move to Oren, to Web API, is specifically to encourage contributions. Because if we're running on the standard API that everyone knows, it's much easier for someone to go and say, oh, I need this extra feature. This is also relevant when we are talking about extending RavenDB. one of the features that we always had was the notion of bundles, and the notion that users can have their own bundles. So now you can write your own web API controller, which presumably most of you are familiar with, and you stick it in a DLL, and it runs inside the RavenDB namespace. So inside the RavenDB process. That means that it has direct access to the database. That means that you can start doing all sorts of really cool stuff. Just to give you some idea, replication is built using bundles. Most of our features are actually, we are trying hard to deliver them as bundles because it makes more sense to work that way. We've done a lot of work around indexing, a lot of work around operations. Where is Jonathan? So Jonathan is going to talk tomorrow. Tomorrow, a lot more about operations, how they're working with Raven HQ. But we're going to try to make his role as easy as possible. So we've done a lot of work on operation sides. We have RavenFS, which is really cool, and we show it later. Java Client API, and this is really important because into this bucket, we throw everything. That's probably the most important features that we have. Because that's the part when you start using RavenDB and you don't lose your hair. You start using RavenDB and you don't feel like you should hit the wall. And you start using RavenDB and 2 years later you use RavenDB and you forgot about it because it didn't give you any also. And we have the new studio. And now this is the time for a demo. Before I do that, we spent 18 months on your features that are at the HTTP layer, storage layer, this layer, whatever. We improve indexing and operations. We've actually only been doing the HTML5 studio for the past, 4 months? Something like that? Yeah. So we currently have a big team working on that, and we have done a lot, and I want to thank Judah for kicking that process off. But there are still bugs. And you will find bugs when you start using them. And I actually have a team waiting in Israel just for your bugs so they can try to fix them as soon as possible. So with that caveat, let's go. OK. So this is the new studio. And that's how it basically goes. Effectively, this should have the exact same thing, the exact same experience as you had with the old studio. Just so we know, the old studio is still there. You can see it here, still doing its job. It's just that we don't want to touch it anymore. Major reason that we want to move from this studio to the new one is that this guy is Silverlight. It's dead. It's painful. And it causes so many bugs. So this is how it looks like. We have indexing, the works. Setting, task, whole bunch of stuff. Please note that we have some features that we intentionally didn't touch yet. For example, importing or exporting from the database, mostly because we can do that using Smuggler, and we wanted to focus on getting functionality right. For all of those features, you can see in the studio there is the associated link. So you can just go there, look at the issue, subscribe to that. So if that's important to you, you can do that. So that's it. That's the studio. Judah is going to have a talk dedicated to that. So I'm not going to go too deeply into this. And this is important, OK? I know people are going to look at the UI and think that this is it. OK? And yes, we have made a major change to the UI, and it's very cool. And there are some features about the UI that have been requested for a long time. For example, if you have a test instance and a production instance, now we can give you different teams So you won't go into the studio and say, oh, I'm just going to delete this thing, and then you realize, oh, I just deleted the data on production. That has been a feature request for, I think, 2 years. It just was so hard to do with Silverlight, so we had no intention of doing that. With the HTML5 Studio, it should be very easy to do. So we'll have the build up and running in about an hour. You will be able to go play with that. I encourage you to do so. This is where you send bugs. And my own preference, look beyond the UI. We know that we have issues in the UI. By the way, I know that I'm preparing you for the UI, doesn't work and everything. It actually works very, very well. The only problem is that I want you to look at the actual features that, I built. Seriously now. There are some features. The features aren't what you should be excited about. We spend so much time just getting ready to be able to do the cool stuff. And here's some of the things that we're talking about. With indexing, what are the #1 problems that you have with indexing? People? Give me problems that you have with indexing. They take time. Okay. I'm sorry, there's absolutely nothing that we can do about that. The reason is that, we have indexing. In order to do indexing, I have to do an Oren operation, go over all the data. You have lots of data, it's going to take some time. We did improve performance on that part, but let's try something else. What's more? Problems that you have with indexing.
It can be hard to tell why some indexes are rebuilding.
Okay, so what's going on? And that's actually part of operations. And we now have those guys. Okay, so you can see per index, and the RavenHQ guys are laughing at me because this is going to make their life much, much, much easier. So now you have better visibility into what actually is going on in here. You can see which indexes are running, how long they took to do X, Y, Z, at what stage they are, all bunch of stuff like that. Other issues that you run into with indexing. Versioning of indexes? What do you mean?
Because it takes so long to build it, we usually just deploy a version of the same index with a new name.
Okay.
And we swap it out after.
Okay. So this actually relates to a lot of problems that people had with indexes about the names. And that's actually really interesting. Internally, RavenDB used to store indexes by name. And that meant that we had a lot of problems when you wanted to start touching things. For example, if you have a big MapReduce index, if you had an index that uses load document, modifying that index requires that we delete the index, create it again, and then re-index everything. Internally in Trio, we moved from using an index name to using an internal ID. And that ID is basically transparent to you. You don't care about that. But that means that when you want to make a change to an index, we start a background process that deletes that index and reassign an ID for that name. So changing indexes, even big ones, should be much, much faster. On the same vein, this is a planned feature. It's not current. But the idea here is that you can take an index, and when you're modifying the index, you're going to say something like, OK, this modification is going to run in parallel. So I'm going to have the existing index running live, working just nicely. I'm going to have the new index with the same name. But until it catches up, you have the old index that serves everything. By the way, the old index is also indexing new documents. But you basically have a shadow version of that index that runs concurrently. More problems that you had with indexes? How many of you ever had a big database? And with big databases, you tend to have one collection that you know 3 million records, and another database that you have 5 records. Sorry, another collection that have 5 records. And now I want, I just want to index the 5 records. And that takes time because RavenDB actually has to go through all of your documents to do that. With Trio, that's no longer the case. We have an explicit optimization in place that allows us to take advantage of what we already know and just index the things that we know to be of this value. You're going to see a lot of stuff like that, where we hear problems from the field and we are doing something to fix that. Sometimes it's hard. There is nothing I can do to fix the general problem of, I have 100 million documents I'm going to index. I'm going to have to do a minimum of 100 million operations. Nothing to do about that, but a lot of the stuff we can actually fix. This is important. We had a bunch of stuff like that on the mail list at Raven HQ, where this is something called fan out. And fan out is basically when you have an index that for each document, it outputs multiple index entries. And in the worst case, that can be a single document that outputs hundreds or thousands of index entries. And that really breaks down a lot of things internally inside RavenDB, because we assume that there is a small number of index entries per document. And we did a lot of work there as well, both to optimize that and to warn you that something wrong is going. On operation sides, major problem that we had, and the reason that it's on the top of the list, is the perf counters. Because for some reason, and I'm only using the public API. I'm not even doing that much with performance counters, but people run into corruption of performance counter all the time. And performance problem and hanging and whatever. We switched to an internal library. It's called metrics.net. It gives us both faster performance and no external dependencies. And interestingly enough, a lot more information. So now we're able to report interesting things like, see if I can show it. Yes. So now you can see it here. We have a lot more metrics, a lot more information that you can look at. Total number of requests, mean rates, all sorts of stuff like that. And that's really nice when you start trying to figure out, wait, what's going on, where is it going? To the Raven HQ guys, you can get that per database. So you can know who is the annoying guy that is sending 100 requests per second on a free plan. Okay, so again, I'm giving you the direction, the let's make things easier. Periodic backups bundle. Previously, it only did incremental backups, and that was great as long as you never had to do a restore. And the problem here is that, okay, I have to do a restore. My database has been in production for 1.5 years. That's great. And I have a periodic backup every 5 minutes. No problem. Let me just get the 15,000 files that I have in Amazon and download them and apply them and work with that. So that was the problem. We actually changed things. So now we have full and incremental backup. And a common configuration would be you set up the periodic backup to do a full backup every week and an incremental backup every 3 hours. So that's easier to do, and that also means that you can start deleting files and don't have to deal with a lot of stuff like that. Let's see, what else that was fun. We have reduced the number of assemblies, so people complain about that. I don't know why. Seriously, why do you care how many assemblies you have? But apparently that was something people felt really strongly about. So we used some tool called keynote writing, and we now have Raven database as a single 5 megabyte DLL instead of 6 DLLs or something like that. Also, another feature that is really interesting is server-to-server smuggling. And the idea here is basically instead of I need to move data from production to test or from test to production. And that gives you the ability to do so, point here, just move the data directly, and that's very easy to do. So that's another thing, increasing access. And the reason that this slide is empty is that I really want to get some feedback from you throughout the conference and afterward. I want to be able to see where are the things that we can give you more insight, more guidance, more help. We have started building additional tools that can give you additional guidance. For example, we have a tool, we have it implemented, we don't have the UI yet, but it can analyze your indexes and suggest improvements. Those two indexes can be merged into a single index. No one is using that index, you can drop it, those sort of things. So I would really like to get additional feedback from you about how it works, what to do with that, those sort of things. And now we have for big ticket item, RavenFS. And I mentioned that we have some things that were written in 2011. RavenFS is the thing. It's been in production since 2012. Which is funny because we had very few problems with that, but we just never able to do the entire work of integrating that, document that, all of that. The basic premise is very simple. I have a lot of files. Those can be many small files. Those can be very big files. By big files, by the way, I'm talking about in the multiple gigabyte range. And that means that I have a lot of files that I need to work with them. And more importantly, I need to share them among multiple locations. And the case in point is I have a team in Shanghai and I have a team in New York. And they're both graphic people. And they build some sort of a creative design together. And if you work with things like Photoshop, if you work with video files, those things can be very, very big. And just sending files via email isn't going to work. So what we actually have been doing is we have a process that can recognize only the differences between things and send only those differences between the servers. And that means that you have a drastically reduced bandwidth costs. And you have drastically improved latency because you just change some file. We don't have to copy the whole file to the Shanghai office. We can copy just the 1 megabyte that was changed. The basic idea here, by the way, is that we want to replace attachments. Attachments were always an ancillary feature in RavenDB. They have been supported, they work, they do replication very well, but we never did UI for them. We never did everything that would require you to actually make them into a force-late feature. RavenFS is the answer to that, mostly because this is something that people want. There was a Stack Overflow question a couple of days ago. I want to store attachments in RavenDB of up to 2 gigabytes in size. You can, doesn't mean you should. Okay? So that's it. And the UI for RavenFS is very limited. Let's put it this way. So I'm going to show you. I'm not going to actually demo that. The basic UI is you go to database. Now you have an additional tab. You can go to file systems. And just like with databases, you can have multiple file systems on a server. And now you have basically files. And you can look at them. You can search through them. You can set up replication to remote servers, and you can see that you will have the information about what's going on with the system. I'm replicating this file to this destination. I'm getting this file from that destination, etc. We have some configuration here that I don't think is relevant. No. So that's the idea. Probably the most important thing about it is the notion that we can have multiple file systems on the same server. And our expectation is that users who need RavenFS will usually have a matching database and file system names. So you have my blog project as a database name and my blog project as a file system, and you access them both as you need it, as you wish, and it's all gets replicated. An interesting feature that came up with regards to this is using RavenFS as a database. And what do I mean by that? Think about processing videos. You have a big file coming into the website, into the web server, and you don't want to try to process that on the web server. That's too expensive. So you basically dump it into RavenFS. RavenFS takes care of moving that to a remote location where you have the processor that goes and reads and does whatever you do with video files, write it back. Maybe you need to do some markup, some changes, whatever. And then only the changes that happen to that file get replicated back to the web server, and you save a lot of time and effort just moving files around. Okay, so split and polish. There's actually a lot of stuff going on in there. I just put the things that I really care about. Preserving missing properties. This is an interesting feature. What happens when you delete a property in RavenDB today? Do you know? When you delete a property on your model classes and you load the class, well, we don't have that property. So when you save the document back, it gets saved without that property. So we had users that complained about, that feared about data loss because of that. So what happens now is that you delete that property is going to be preserved even when you change things. So you remove a property, you load the document, you change another property, you save it back. The changed property is there, the missing property is there, nothing is lost. We have stronger support for async in general. More specifically, we have now async loading we have lazy queries now working for async. And this one is important. We now have a single pipeline. Previously, we have the embedded and the remote document stores, and each of them works slightly differently, and there were some things, unfortunately, that only work when you were running embedded. We know that because when we switched to the single pipeline, we got a lot of bugs. And the basic idea is that there is no change between the way that we work. If we work on an embedded system, we still go through the HTTP pipeline. It's not really an HTTP pipeline. There is no ports or anything like that. But it does mean that you get the same benefits throughout the system. By the way, one major benefit that you get is that now you have multiple databases support for when you're running embedded. That's a major feature that was missing. And as I mentioned, everything is on Oren. That's in preparation to move in to a more middleware role where you can host us inside your own system, and we don't care where we're actually running. Again, I really want to get you to comment on that. I want you basically to look at RavenDB 3.0 and see the part when you run into any sort of friction, because that's the part where we want to pay attention to. So this is where we are now. We are basically stabilizing 3.0. We still have a lot of work to do on the UI side of things. We still have some work to do on let's make sure that everything works. The current builds that you have available are going to force you to run on with all of the new features on. This is strictly for the pre-release period because we don't want people to go, oh, I want to try RavenDB 3.0, let me go with Ascent and the old studio. Well, the old studio is still accessible, but we don't want people run with Ascent and everything else and just test out or test drive a small part of the changes. We want people to actually get all of the changes that we have. So that's for the next month or so, that's going to be on. You can only run RavenDB 3.0 using Voron. We found some bugs, but I think that by this time, Voron is very stable. Again, we need to see people who are actually using that in anger. So please try it. And hopefully, there is not going to be any major features until the release. There might be, tiny little ones, but we want to be frozen and just work on stabilization. And I didn't talk about Voron at all, intentionally, because Voron isn't important. It's just for internal use. It's just for our own needs. No, I'm kidding with you. Voron is actually really, really important. The reason it's important is, well, I think that I have a talk about after lunch. And the reason it's important is because it opens up a lot of very interesting scenarios. Because now we own the entire stack. That means that we have optimization that runs through the entire stack. That means that on some of our tests, we are faster than Ascent in both reads and writes. That means that we can tailor things directly to what we need. And tomorrow morning, I'm actually going to stand here and build a database capable of handling 100 billion records live. Okay? So I'm probably going to ask you to get some Rotten Tomatoes and throw it at me, okay? Because that's what happens when you do live demos. But that's the idea, okay? Because it enables us to do a lot of really, really interesting stuff. And this is where we're going. The actual stuff, these are things that are actually happening. We are going to do log shipping with Voron. And this is a feature that my last update was about 2 hours ago. It's nearly done. There is something called Raft, which is a consensus algorithm. And the basic idea is that we have at the storage level, deep replication support. So we can spin up 5 servers, write to one of them, they get a majority quorum, and work with that. This is important to do at the at the storage level layer, because the next thing that we want to do is a polyglot persistence. And you all know that relational databases aren't the answer to everything. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And but the interesting part about that is that people move from, oh, I'm doing stuff with relational databases, I'm going to move to a RavenDB and do everything with RavenDB. And RavenDB is a wonderful database. There is no bias whatsoever in saying that. But it's a wonderful database, but it's a wonderful database for the sort of thing that it does. And it can do everything. But we do want to be able to give you everything, so we want to be able to tailor solutions specific to specific needs. So RavenFS for file systems, for file distribution, is an example of that. And this is probably going to be just the beginning. We have event aggregation, which is the next polyglot persistent feature. And the basic idea here is that, think about it like this. You're going to store events, provide a MapReduce index on those events, And we're going to be able to process them very, very quickly to give you the results of that. So for example, I think you were talking about doing something with HTTP logs. And the basic idea is that, okay, let's throw all of those HTTP logs into the event store and have a MapReduce index that basically give me how much per hour do we have for every HTTP code. And that store can handle very rapid queries very, very quickly. There is that. On the research side, we have parallel research things of, again, doing things with Voron, doing additional persistent stuff, specifically Corax, Tempox, and Docker. Corax from Corvus Corax, which is Latin for the common Raven. This is an attempt by us to write Lucene from scratch. This is actually currently on GitHub, github.com/and/Corax. Currently, it's 500 lines of code. Currently, it does about 70% of what Lucene can do. Probably badly, but at least I can read the code. Tempos is a time series database. And again, this is actually what we're going to demo tomorrow. I'm going to demo how we can deal with time series using Voron. And a lot of people are using RavenDB for doing that. So we want to give you a dedicated solution for that. And Docker is a distributed counter feature. The basic idea is that if you have an ad agency and you want to count clicks, or if you have a reality TV show and you want to count votes, basically any time that you want to count a lot of things and do that in a scalable fashion, we want to be there and to help you do that. And today, after hours, and I think it's about 6, we want to stay here and do a hackathon. Pick a feature and do it from start to finish. That means persistence, that means UI, that means network. We would like you to stay here, anyone who wants, and take part of that. I think that could be a lot of fun. And questions? Yes?
One of the operations regarding the server host.
Sorry?
The hosting.
Yes.
We have two models, right?
Okay, so we used to have two models. We had the embedded and the remote.
The IaaS or the Windows service.
Oh, yeah, we still have those.
Okay. Do you think, RavenDB should do something better, just use native IaaS or native Windows service, use some more reliable model? Because we are seeing, for example, IaaS, a lot of things is not in the control.
The reason that we support both models, both IaaS and the service model, it's about control. We have people who want to run on IaaS because IaaS is a managed container. It prevents us from, dealing with DDoS attacks. It prevents us from malform URLs, all sorts of stuff like that. The other side of that is that it can be constraining sometimes. If you want to run on a shared host, you pretty much have to do it on IaaS. If you want to run on your own servers, usually running on as a Windows servers is easier because you set it up and you forget about it, basically. Sometimes you want to do things with more complex stuff, and Oren enables that because now you can host RavenDB yourself in basically any conceivable manner by just having an Oren hoster. And that's it. You had a question? Yeah.
So you had mentioned that embedded mode will support multiple databases.
Yes.
So does that mean that the system database will no longer be the default for that?
Yes. Yes.
So for the multi-tenant, the environment, so right now we don't have individual control, so take off one of the database or something like that. example, if we do the maintenance, we have to shut down IIS. That's actually cause all the database get shut down.
Yeah, but you don't. That's a deployment decision. You can run multiple IIS sites on the same for different tenants if you want to do that.
But sometimes, because you make decisions, you can. So which means what's the purpose with your multi-tenant? Your one instance if you cannot maintain individually. So
The basic idea is that you have a single process that can host multiple databases.
yeah, but for the maintenance, your point, you're saying you should have the capability to take off or take online for the individual tenant database.
Yeah, you can do that. You can shut down a specific tenant very easily.
How is it supposed to
You go, something like this. That's it.
So
And
that
you-
actually takes down the
That, what I just did, this took down the tenant, and the tenant will refuse to start until something happens. Till you set disable to true,
so actually
to false.
safely move the storage file around.
Yes, yes, yes. So the upgrade path from 2.5 Ascent to 3.0 Voron is you smuggle from Ascent into Voron. That's the basic idea. You can use the server-to-server feature and do it on a live system. The basic idea, by the way, of the server-to-server is that you can apply it multiple times. So let's say that you have a very big database. You are going to say, OK, let's copy from A to B. That's going to take 3 hours. In those 3 hours, there have been changes made to this database. So I'm done with that. I'm going to apply it again until I've caught up, and then I can switch those things. But yeah, there is no on-disk manner that will let you switch between those. After we remove the limit of only run on Voron, which is for the pre-release only, if you try to set up a RavenDB database to use Voron and point it at the directory that uses Ascent, it will recognize that and use Ascent. There is no direct path between them. You have to import and export. Yes?
Go from 2.0 to 3.0?
Yes.
Skip 2.5?
Yes. So the question is, can you skip 2.5 to go directly to 3.0? Yes. The only thing that you have to do is just get the export. The export format is stable and working on any version.
So which means if I upgraded the 2.5 to 2.0, I have to export and import to the.
If you want to use Voron, yes.
Okay.
If you want to use Ascent, then it will handle the upgrade on its own. You don't have to worry about that. Yes?
Are there any significant changes to the way patching works?
Uh,
The scripted patching?
yes, in the sense that, well, that depends if you talk about the feature or the UI.
Both, I think, we use patching heavily. I think we're moving away from it because we have a little bit of the amount of weight we put on it. And part of that is due to the lack of feedback sometimes we get from the UI.
Yeah, so in the UI, we have this guy, which, as you can see, isn't done. If you can go into that link and just say what you want, that will be helpful. That will be very helpful for us to know what sort of things we have.
I can tell you right now,
I won't be able to remember that, so that's not really helpful. Yeah. Okay. One last question. Going once? Yes.
You talked a little bit about the missing property feature. I mean, does that make the way that now is really is that something that we opt out of?
Yeah, you can say I don't want this feature. I don't remember how to do that, but there is a probably a convention that's something that does that. Oh, yeah.
With regards to RavenFS, do you see using
I have no reason, I don't see a reason why you can do that. Yeah, it should be trivial to handle that. Okay. Really last one question. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you wiring up indexing to attachments so that you can apply searching throughout something that is?
We already have that for RavenDB attachments, and we'll probably have that for RavenFS files as well, yes. Okay, guys, thank you very much.